Hello and welcome to another live stream from the North Adelaide Baptist Church Hall. Thanks to our partners, the National Trust South Australia and 5MBS Radio, Recitals Australia is very excited to present our Emerging Artist Series, continuing a tradition of presenting young and upcoming Adelaide musicians to live audiences. Even if you're not with us in a live sense today, I really appreciate your company. It's terrific to have everybody along. And I'm very grateful for all of the donations and support that we've been given over the months, which enable us to do these performances. So thank you very much for being a part of it. We are completely delighted today to welcome pianist Dylan Henderson doing a wonderful Chopin program, and we are extremely excited and happy for him to step in to a complex program when Aidan Sullivan, unfortunately, was not able to join us today with his viola due to a technical problem. Aidan Sullivan will be joining us on the 27th of May, so please put that date in your diary, and I look forward to welcoming Aidan and Michael Iarachi on that date. Please note, if you're listening to us on Facebook, sometimes Facebook decides that the Emerging Artist performance is so good that we must be ripping it from a classical music CD owned by Universal or Sony. If you're having trouble, unfortunately, with listening to our live stream, I suggest that you join us on Vimeo or head to our homepage where you can actually check in on the live stream there without the interruptions. So, see how we go. Without any further ado, please now welcome Dylan Henderson. Thank you.
welcome. Thank you so much, all of you, for listening, those of you who have tuned in, and those of you who would like to listen later. You can at the Recitals Australia website. Thank you so much to Mark Derard for inviting me to perform in this series. It's been a pleasure to play for you this afternoon. And thank you to Recitals Australia for all the amazing work you do supporting young, emerging artists. It's such a privilege to have an organisation that cares so much about young artists. It's continuing to do its bit throughout this unprecedented time, so we're all very grateful for that, so thank you very much. I have one final piece as an encore which I'd like to play for you today. This is the so-called Lento con gran espressione. It's probably the first work that Chopin composed after he left Warsaw forever at the age of 19. And it's generally referred to as a kind of nocturne. It was published after his death, and it's generally presented at the end of the cycle, but it was actually probably one of the first that he ever wrote. So this is the Lento con gran espressione.
Thank you, Dylan. Back to me for a moment. We're going to try an experiment today, which I hope will bring the real humans, which are obviously with us today, a bit closer to all our virtual friends that have joined us. We're going to do a short interview with Dylan, so he and I are going to have a very short chat. Just give us a few moments while we set up the camera. Shouldn't be hopefully too long. And I'd appreciate you very much staying behind to watch us. Just like to say thank you to all the donors. Our Emerging Artist series are completely run by a voluntary council, and in fact we rely on donations to be able to provide these programs to you. The usual door price is $5, and if you think you've enjoyed yourself today, or even if you just wish to support our programs and what we do, please do consider giving us a donation. I'm very, very grateful to everybody that continues to make our work possible. So I think we're pretty good. Let me just head over now to Dylan and we'll have a short chat. Thank you. Right. Hello, Dylan.
Hello, Mark.
Is it working? I think everyone's with us. I'm getting the thumbs up. How are you?
We are getting thumbs up. I'm well. How are you?
I'm all right, thank you. What an amazing program.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. How do you keep all that in your head? Is there a method?
Oh, it's just a lot of practice, really.
What an amazing thing. Well, I find it's just stunning actually to hear, almost an hour, isn't it, of music just coming from your head. It's great. Yeah, well done.
Thank you.
So we had a few questions actually from the audience. So I thought I might just lead off with one of those.
Yeah, go for it.
So one of them said that you're studying at the Elder Con in a postgraduate sense. The impact of period instruments, I guess, on Chopin's compositional work. Right?
Yep.
Did you want to just discuss that in like a 1 or 2 minute summary?
Sure. Well, I'll try and be brief. Well, basically, it's a project that's sort of come about because so much of this music was written on an instrument which is fundamentally very different from what I just played on and what it usually gets played on. And Chopin, throughout his lifetime, was really pushing the boundaries of the instrument. I mean, you can hear it in that Fantaisie. The compass of the keyboard even back then was the one that he was working on, a Pleyel, had only 82 keys instead of the 88. And so there's some instances in that piece where he really goes right down to the very bottom notes of the keyboard. And that kind of meant something. It had an even more kind of symbolic kind of weight to going right to the bottom of the keys. But there were so many differences about these pianos. Pleyel pianos were the ones that he loved the most, and he, according to Liszt, he loved them for a very particular kind of silvery sound that they have with those instruments. But they also had a much lighter action that was smaller in size, and the stringing of the instrument was actually quite different. So instead of being overstrung on an angle like that, which is kind of the kind of dominant design that Steinway patented back in about the 1870s, and it's kind of just been accepted as the norm ever since then. But before then, all pianos were straight strung, and so you had very peculiar kinds of register characteristics. So in the middle, it might sound sort of mellow. Up the top, it might sound sort of glassy and silvery, and at the bottom, quite sort of rich. But you'd also get more clarity because the strings aren't crossing one another. So you can do a lot of things with the pedal, a lot of pedal effects, which give that kind of otherworldly sort of colour and sound world to Chopin, which is incredibly important. But then even the difference between something like a Pleyel and a Graf just 10 years earlier is actually so huge. So there's so many interesting differences there, which I'm currently looking into.
Have you ever been able to try one of those pianos?
Yeah, so they've got quite a really good collection at the Sydney Conservatorium of Music, and I was able to go there last year and play on a replica 1820 Graf, around about 1820, by Paul McNulty, which is a beautiful new instrument, so everything just works. But it's so different. It's kind of like if you imagine, the analogy that I always use is, if you imagine one of those big old sort of chunky computer keyboards where the depth is so kind of big compared to a MacBook keyboard where everything's just so fine and you hardly have to do anything to get the key to go down. It's kind of like one of them. A modern piano is actually, the depth of the key is so much deeper than one of these. It's so light and you just don't have to do anything to get the sound.
Harder work? So
well, it's not. It's
not
no,
really
on the period instruments it's easier.
Yeah, that's
because
what I mean.
it's so much lighter. Yeah, but what you've got to be careful of is that everything's so sensitive, and so it just bangs out really easy. So you have to adjust quite a bit. So the difference I found between that and an 1845 Pleyel, which I was also able to try, was huge. It was actually much easier to adapt to the Pleyel than it was the Graf. So that told me a lot about the fact that the instrument was changing rapidly just in those years of his lifetime. And he was constantly working at the keyboard. He couldn't compose without a keyboard there. So it must have had an enormous impact, I think, on the way he composed.
And how long will you study last into that topic? Like, is it
well, it's at the master's level at the moment. It's probably going to become a doctorate at some point.
Why not? just while we have plenty of time. Is that right? Yeah. Cool. Sounds like a great topic. I thought we might also try a little experiment and go to a question which has come through people watching us live, right? So I can actually see there's one which has come up, which is quite something. Technology, right? So Veronica actually asked the question, so with your study or your performance, did you kind of have any plans that involve travel or overseas or anything like that which have been impacted by the COVID-19?
Well, I was actually really lucky because I did have some travel plans. I actually went to Warsaw and Vienna and Krakow and a whole lot of other places in January. So amazingly, I just missed out on all of that. So it was incredible timing, really. I didn't get to see everything that I wanted to see, so I need to go back at some point. But obviously, that's tricky at the moment. And in terms of gaining access to old instruments, that's proving a little bit challenging at the moment, but hopefully at least our interstate borders will open up relatively soon, and I'll be able to at least go back to Sydney and do some recording there, which is the plan. So.
Well, and of course your work must be impacted at UKARIA.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So that's lucky about that travel then.
Yeah.
Which is very good, isn't it?
Yeah.
What did you think about the sort of experience of a virtual performance today?
It's interesting, yeah. I mean, obviously it can never replace the kind of, like, the density of listening you get in a live performance is really special, I think, and it enables you to do things as a performer that you can't quite do in a practice room. When you have that kind of that collective wave of dopamine that you feel in the audience that's being released at a really special moment, it kind of charges you to kind of push on and go even deeper and find a connection with the music that you're playing that perhaps you can't in a practice room. So that I don't think you get so much in a live streamed performance. But then obviously it's creating a wonderful kind of substitute for the fact that we can't have any concerts at all at the moment. So in that sense, it's doing a great service there. And I think the other thing to be said is that it's kind of causing a bit of a new renaissance in the home or the domestic kind of as a kind of a new place for music making, which is of course what it was back when all this music was being written.
And also music listening.
That's true,
again,
yeah.
in a sort of domestic setting.
Yeah, I mean, so much of Chopin's performances were in his apartment with, people like Liszt and Delacroix and all these amazing creative intellectuals and aristocratic people, and he kind of charmed them all by inviting them to his house and doing these amazing concerts. And then he'd only give, like, very few actual public concerts. And of course, when he did, they'd all sell out within hours and there'd be ludicrously expensive ticket prices, and that's how he kind of forged his way in Paris. But it kind of is interesting seeing what's happening now, because it's kind of forcing musicians to go back to that kind of music making, which I think is in a way really lovely.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting to see what the kind of impact is on performing fees and the concept of where income comes from. And
that's the challenging part, isn't it? It's
very complicated, and also expectations of the audience in terms of what the internet represents. And, it's an interesting question. I'm just extremely lucky that in Recitals Australia sense, I guess our emerging artist programs are meant to be very open access. And we're just, very, very grateful for all of you, help working with us.
We're all very grateful for you for providing performance opportunities. There's not a whole lot we can get. So,
we've been doing this for nearly 50 years, which is a long time in South Australia. It's a pretty exciting thing. So, I think. Would you like to talk about anything else? You're very welcome.
I think I'm okay.
You're done?
Unless anyone else has more questions. But.
No, I think we should be right. I think we've taken up our allotted time. So thank you very much to Dylan for joining us today for this wonderful experiment. I'm extremely grateful that he's given his time to work in a virtual setting. Whilst perhaps we don't see you, we can definitely feel the audience with us, and your reactions through things like Vimeo and Facebook and the emails that we're getting every week, pretty fantastic. I can see that from the numbers there was about 130, 140 people that joined us in a live setting today, which is pretty terrific, and of course many, many more people will join us during the week through the archive and on our website. I'd like to just say thanks again to the National Trust South Australia for their wonderful help and new partnership with us to create the North Adelaide Baptist Church Hall as a music venue, which will be continuing beyond these initial COVID-19 isolation experiments. And also to 5MBS for all of the terrific audio which you would have enjoyed today. Really a terrific job. And last but not least at all, thank you very much to all of my Recitals Australia colleagues, the volunteer council and the people that assist us with running these events. It certainly wouldn't be possible without their help and their wonderful assistance, and I'm very, very grateful for all their wonderful support. So this is Mark Derard from Recitals Australia signing off for another day, and we very much look forward to having your company next week when we present another lunch hour series. Thank you.